I definitely suffered from like shiny object syndrome really, really bad in the beginning of my career. And I think that I had to just learn the hard way. Podcast is like one of the most successful mediums in the world right now. So if you don't have it, one of your competitors are going to be in there. The reason that a lot of these businesses are blowing up is because they have the audience and they've delayed the ask on that audience. They've built it up, built it up, built it up.
Before we start this podcast, I have one little favor to ask you. Can you please hit the subscribe button down below so we can help more people every single week? Thank you. Let's go. Let's do it. All right. So I've been following your stuff for, I'd nearly say 4 or 5 years. And what I've noticed during that period is that I've gotten older looking and you've gotten younger looking. How the hell does that happen?
Oh, I think I've just lost a bit of weight and started to take care of myself a little bit better.
What do you think was the reason for that? Was it like health, fitness, wealth? Like what's the kind of process there?
I think that it's just like when you're in the early starting of a business, it's just like extreme unbalance, but it's just priorities, to be honest. There's no excuse around it. It shouldn't happen, but it does. So it's just, definitely placing more emphasis on it. Ultimately, like, you can only push into your business what you've got within yourself. So you don't have energy, you're not kind of looking after yourself. There's only so much more that you can there's only so much that you can push out into the marketplace with.
How would you compare like when you were slightly like less in shape versus now, right? Because you were still building a very successful company at that time, doing a ton of other shit. Do you think that like you're getting more out of it now, or is it nearly a different baseline because you're not going 0 to 1 or 0 to 10 anymore? You're 1 to fucking 1,000 at this point, right?
There's always different ascension points. And there's different things that you're going to be working on. Definitely the stuff that I'm working on now is very different, but that's like no excuse for not being in shape. Like, I don't think there's ever an excuse around it. Like, you can try to convince yourself that there is excuses, but it's just wherever focus goes, energy flows. And that was something that was just like, I want to get in better shape. And that's why it happened.
How do you build that into your process now? Because you have your wife, you have 3 kids, roughly, is it? Like, how the hell do you do that, man? I can barely manage myself running a company on my own as it is.
Just making time. Like, I think that like I get up, between 4 and 5 and then hit the gym really, really early. It's one of those things where it's like when you've got a big team and you've got a business and you've got a family and a household and everything that you're looking to run, is if you leave those kind of things to like later in the day, they can get ignored. Because it's just like, oh, there's this bushfire that I need to go to attend to, or this needs doing, or, one of the kids are sick and I need to do whatever it might be, right? But it's like that time in the morning, if you wake up before everybody else wakes up, then there isn't anything that's going to get in the way of you doing what it is that you need to do, short of like a natural disaster. So it's just like, realistically, I just try to create and optimize my defaults just to make things easy to do and make sure that like there isn't going to be an excuse that can come up, and it's within my control of being able to do it.
Do you think you were always like that? That thought process of like, you're going to make it work, like, fuck just making excuses. Like, was that kind of always in you, do you think?
I think that like it's something that you build upon, like brick by brick. Like, I always had like a very high level of like self-belief, but it's like when you've got big dreams and you've got big goals and they sound outrageous to you, and then you start to knock them off one by one, it just creates a high level of conviction of like, if you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. And it just comes down to that, right? And it's just like, it just builds upon yourself, where you know that where there is a will, there is a way. And if you focus on it enough and you bring enough intensity to it for a long enough period of time, that there's very little that you can't achieve.
You speak about focus quite a lot. I think that's super interesting. Like, people like, I don't know if you're familiar with Charlie Morgan, like Sam Ovens, they were like kind of some of the OGs in terms of like what is capable when you have that specific focus, right? And I think I've learned a lot from them over the past couple of years. How do you think about that for yourself, right? Because as well as your company, you're also like angel investing in different companies as well. How do you split your focus, right? Because then that's the issue for a lot of entrepreneurs, like shiny penny syndrome, early stages as well in the business.
Yeah, I definitely suffered from like shiny object syndrome really, really bad in the beginning of my career. And I think that I had to just learn the hard way of like, I had businesses, like I made my first million when I was 24. Then I ran a few other businesses. I ran some into the ground. I sold one. And in all of the instances where like the businesses were failures, they were all because of like my ability to focus um, on what the main thing was. And so like the thing that just crystallizes that more than anything is just if there's anybody that you look up to and you look at their feats of what they've been able to accomplish and they seem unfathomable to you, is understand that they still like walk and talk like you, they sleep like you, they've got the same 24 hours in a day. So it's not like they're not some different breed of human. It's just their ability to, one, make the decisions of what to focus on, then the opportunities that they're going to pursue, and then what they prioritize. And that's the framework that you need to look at and understand like what it is that you want to focus on.
Have you ever heard like Tim Ferriss say it's about, are you chasing mice or are you chasing an antelope? Have you heard that reference?
I haven't,
Oh,
but
it's
I
just
like it.
so interesting, right? So a lion doesn't chase after mice, and the reason being is because the amount of energy that's required for him to do that, like would exhaust the lion, burn calories, burn energy. So he could go days and days looking for the antelope, and then when he searches the antelope, he has that laser focus and literally just like borderline obsessed to get it. Because if he gets an antelope, he has food for a week, whereas chasing mice can barely last you half a morning. So it's kind of like, what game are you playing? I think that's kind of interesting too in this space. It's like, we don't know what's the best opportunity all the time, and that's when you kind of have the girl in the red dress, right? You're like looking, thinking, oh, is this better? Is that better? Could I be doing this? Should I be doing SaaS? Where it's like if you actually just try to focus on the highest leveraging you can. Now that's super difficult, of course, when you're starting, right? But it's a good barometer to, it's almost like a mental model to say like what should I do next. I think that's kind of the point you're at too, right? Like where do you go from here, looking for the antelope in that space.
Yeah, and I think that that's a constant question that you need to really be kind of asking yourself and looking at is like, what are those opportunities? And it all comes down to like what the payoff is and how much leverage that you're going to be able to apply to it. Because like, fixing like a small like marketing problem or going after like, a small solution, it's like the payoff is just not going to be there. So at this stage that I'm at in my career now, I'm definitely looking to make big swings and big bets on things and allocate my time accordingly. And that means that there are failures along the way, but it's like if some of those big things connect, then like the outputs are disproportionate. And so I feel like it's not something that you do once. It's something that you need to be consciously aware of. It's something that I just look at my calendar and I just constantly think of, does this need to be there? Do I need to be doing this? And what is the goal of that? Like, where is it that I'm trying to go? And how does this support me getting there? And do I get the most amount of leverage from that activity? I.e., do I do one like, meeting or event or something with somebody that I get no leverage from, like it's a one-time event and I only get resources or output from that one-time event, or it is something that I will get compound interest on as time goes on, right? And so that's the lens that I try to look at it through, is what are those things that are going to serve me not next year, but like in the next 5 to 10 years from now. And try and put myself in that position, because if you're constantly thinking about what is it that I'm going to achieve this year, like the most successful people are people that are just able to extend their time horizons for much longer. And you can look at it in the macro or you can look at it in the micro. Like people that build bigger businesses, they typically do not try to make as much money as they possibly can year one, right? They have long-term perspective. They're looking at building in infrastructures, teams, product that is going to be superior, that they might leverage 5 years down the track, right? Or 10 years down the track. And that's like the longer your time horizon, typically the more success and the bigger the games.
That's super interesting. I'm just thinking of it in terms of like cash flow businesses versus like a startup, traditional VC startup business, right? Like I come from that world, which is like you make no money for 10 years and hopefully hit $1 billion status and sell it, right? How do you think about that in the context of like agency businesses, client businesses? Because everyone on Twitter is telling you about how to make like a 10K or 100K a month, right? How do you kind of think about that mental model to think, what am I building today, even if it is an agency, and how does that serve me 5, 10, 15 years from now?
Yeah, I think that like when you're saying how does it serve me, like you first need to think of the real question of like what is it that where is it going to be serving you? Like what is it that you actually want to do, right? Like what's the game that you want to play? What do you want to be doing in 10 years from now? What does your life look like? Do you have kids? Do you not have kids? Do you have multiple homes? Do you not? How much liquid cash do you need in order to fund that lifestyle? And then what are the vehicles that you can do that are going to get you there? Right? And then you can obviously play the game of probabilities, right? Whether it's like a high risk startup or a cash flow business or a SaaS business or it's ecom or it's drop shipping or all the different alternatives. But it all just comes down to like, okay, what do you want to be doing in 10 years from now, right? And let's just say that you're the type of person that assigns an arbitrary number to like that of like, oh yeah, I want to be worth $100 million. Terrific. I transfer $100 million into your bank account right now. What does the next year of your life look like? What will you be doing? What will you be working on every day? Like, what will you actually be doing? And I think that I used to always get bogged down by the question of like, what does the dream life look like to you? When it's just too big and it's too esoteric. So you want to boil that down and think about like, what does the dream day look like for you? What time are you waking up? When are you going to bed? What time are you working out? Where are you eating lunch? Who are you eating it with? What are you eating? Where are you? What's the temperature like? What, like all of those different things are viscerally getting clear on like what is it that you would be doing if money was no longer the thing that you were chasing.
That's super interesting, man, because like you can start that life today, right? You can have like good standard, you can have the family you want, you can work towards that today. I think a lot of young guys especially will forego their future, forego their current situation for their future and think, oh, like I can't like have a good day right now because I'm meant to like suffer basically, right? And that's so self-imposed. Whereas you can start moving forward with that, obviously make sacrifices and so on, but work towards a future model. I want to ask you specifically about agencies, right? Because like, you've just kind of smashed the online space for the past couple of years, and like the brand is so strong. Where do you think like the agency world is going right now? Like, what sort of predictions do you have coming up for the next couple of years with agencies? Because they're almost popping up at like 5 or 10 a day. Basically, you're seeing new online.
Yeah, I think that there's like gonna be a lot of people that have like a hard life from running those agencies because I think that like you've got people obviously online saying it's like the best business opportunity, so they're obviously popping up. But the premise of which they are sold at is like this is the easiest and quickest way to get to 10K per month is effectively the promise, right? And it's just it requires like a very high level of like excellence in order to be good. Like there's 9,000 digital agencies in Australia, there's 60,000 in America. Like there is no shortage of agencies. Like it's like they're like cockroaches. You stomp one out, another one pops up. So it's like, and the thing is that a lot of these guys are run like a lot of these businesses are run by people in their pajamas that like they've done a Facebook ads course and they're like, let me start up an agency. And it just becomes a nightmare for them because what they want is easy money. Like what they want is like the easiest path to earning 10K per month, right? And they don't have a passion about it. They don't know how to deal with clients. They're not even a master at the thing that it is that they're offering in the first place. So I think for a lot of those people, AI is just going to come and replace them. Like all like they're like the bottom feeders, and they're gonna get replaced very very quickly. And then it's like if you look at most industries and what's happening, it's like you don't want to be at the bottom of the market and you don't want to be at the middle of the market. Like they're the areas that are getting squeezed. Like if you look at like web development, right? It's like the Wix, the Shopify, all the Squarespaces, like they're just like chewing up all of these people at the bottom end of the market that is like just offering DIY services where you can build your own website yourself. right? And then you've got like the middle of the market that is competing with like the Philippines and India and like areas where like wages are low. And then it's like you get put into that bucket where it's like every day people are getting 160 emails from Rajesh in India, or Edward in the Philippines to build them a brand new Shopify website for $2,500 US, right? And it's like a lot of people then go for that option. And a lot of people are like, if you speak to most people, they've hired 2 or 3 different digital agencies and they have been burnt to an absolute crisp, by somebody that is making some no risk offer to somebody that actually does have a lot of risk in it. And that risk is that they don't know what the hell that they're talking about and they cannot get you the results regardless. And the most expensive thing is time, it's not money. So I think that a lot of people like are just going to get more and more dubious, and you're going to need like more and more proof in order to be able to basically get clients. You're going to have like 2 ends of the spectrum. You're going to have to offer the most outrageous guarantee, which we're already seeing how that's playing out. Like either people like reading my book or reading Alex's book and then being like, okay, I need to have like a strong offer. And then they make a really strong offer. And then they're like, oh, I can't deliver on this. And then a lot of people go through that thing and they're like, I can't deliver on this. And then when someone sees that offer, they're like, I don't give a fuck about the offer because you don't know what you're talking about. Like, do you know what I mean? That they've already played that exercise. And so because that's already happening in the market, it's just it's going to get to a place where people are just very, very jaded and they're very, very skeptical. And you're going to need to have like a big body of proof to prove to people that you actually know what it is that you're talking about.
Yeah, man, it's just a problem with like guarantees in general though as well, right? That people are trying to get anything to get foot in the door. It's front of office versus like fulfillment. And what we're seeing is like people just not being able to deliver. Now, why do you think that is? Is it because like people are just going 0 to 1 super quickly saying, hey, I can edit your videos for you? Or is there like a fundamental problem with like actually like how platforms change? Because what I like about your stuff is that, you're saying like things are always updating, right? You're like, ads are always updating, creatives updating, you need to be testing, so on. Do you think people just don't move fast enough, or they're just not getting the skill that they need to be able to actually become an entrepreneur, right? To do the thing that they said they were going to do.
Everyone wants to get to 100K a month. They don't want to be a 100K per month person. So it's like everyone's just chasing the bag, and it's like they don't want to actually do the work and say like, okay, well, like first of all, how do I become somebody that is actually worthy of earning $100,000? Like how good at solving this problem that I say that my offer solves am I actually in doing that? And it's like a lot of people just they're not willing to do those things, and it's not about like just constantly testing the creatives and da da da. It's actually being a master at what it is that you do, right? And being able to do what it is that you're saying that you're going to do for your clients, for yourself to begin with.
Yeah.
Like that's the ridiculous amount of digital agencies that don't use digital marketing to grow their digital agency is ridiculous. Um, and it's like the overweight personal trainer. It's like, come on now. So yeah, that's the first thing. It's like you need to like fundamentally get good at what it is that you've got,
Yeah.
and focus on that and focus on the fulfillment. And you can't have one without the other. You can't
Uh,
be really good at fulfillment and not be able to get clients, and you can't be really good at being able to get clients and not good at fulfillment.
so for our company, we're focused on like long form podcasts, mainly on the coaching and monetization side as well. So like we're building offers on the back end, running podcasts for like big companies, big tech companies and whatnot. And whenever we get on a call with someone, the first person I always show is myself. Open up our YouTube, watch through exactly what's happened for myself, look at our posts, look at our posts on LinkedIn, look at them on YouTube,
Yep.
showing that as a case study. And then some might say, oh, like show me a company that's the size of, 50 million as a result, what happened there. But I think the first thing is always yourself, right? It's the fat personal trainer example. Who would do that?
Yep.
Who would go to a financial advisor who's broke, right? You need to basically to do it for yourself. I think that gets have so much pedigree then to be able to do it for other people. Well, I saw you mention about the vitamin and painkiller solution. So a vitamin is a commodity that basically like no one needs during like a recession downtime. And then the painkiller is something that solves cancer, right? How do you turn a vitamin style business into a painkiller basically?
Yeah, it's a good question. The first thing that you need to understand is like the most important thing for all of this stuff is like market selection. And like, because within like there's some markets that you just don't want to operate in, and it's just going to be too hard of an uphill battle. But if you're looking at your market, the first sin that most people commit is they think about what is convenient for me to sell. What is it that I have got that I can sell to this market? What do I enjoy selling? And they never really look at the real thing of like, what is the market completely starving for? What would they crawl across crushed glass on their knees in order to get? And that's the thing that it is that you want to sell. So it's like it's just thinking about the market first and not the product. So
Mm.
in order, it's not about like turning a vitamin into a painkiller. It's about finding out where the pain is in the market and then actually just having a painkiller, right? You
Mm.
do not want to put lipstick on a pig. So like that you really need to think about that problem that you solve and then making sure that the market is starving for that. Like I learned that the hard way in the early stages of my career is like trying to sell something that I had or that I was interested in rather than what the market really, really wanted. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing that will trump market selection. That is the biggest thing. You
Can
know,
you
you've
give
got
me an
like
example
Warren
of that?
Buffett.
Let's say in terms of is it the industry? Is it the topic? Is it the individual itself for market selection? How do you think about that?
Do you want to launch a podcast for your business, but you don't know where to start? Remove the stress, pressure, and all the overwhelm that comes with it by working with Podcast University. If you're an ambitious individual who wants to build your influence online, grow your own podcast, and also stand out from the crowd, Podcast University is for you. We help you with the strategy, equipment, the content, your guests, everything you need to create a top tier podcast. If you want to learn more, check out Podcast University and start your podcast journey today.
Yeah, so like pick a niche for me.
So let's say we'll just focus on myself, right? We'll selfishly focus on myself. So we're
Yep.
building and growing podcasts. Is podcast
Yep.
the market selection, or is it who I'm serving for? Which for us, it's B2B companies, 1 to 50 million a year.
Yeah. So then, okay, why do people want to start a podcast?
Build their brand so they can sell more, so that they can basically build their influence and status. Status is a big driving factor.
Yep. Okay. So status is a big one. And so as a result of them doing, like, what other activities are they doing to try and get that status or to get more leads, to get more customers?
So it has to like look really good, sound really good, record with good guests, people in their industry, show their authority and influence, and then
Yep.
by having that high level of status, it draws people in, right? So it increases their revenue, and then
Yep.
if we
But
run
what
an
are some of the alternatives that exist, right? That they can do that aren't related to podcasts that will also help them do those things? Facebook ads.
Facebook ads, tweets, put their head out the window and start screaming, right? They can do all these
Yep.
other things. We just focus on the
Okay.
vessel of podcasting, basically.
Yeah. So, and we'll get to that, but you first have to understand like the ecosystem that exists in. So, ultimately, the reason that people want to do a podcast is like the secondary things might be status and whatnot, but it's also to build influence and to build inbound leads, and it's a form of long form marketing.
Correct.
Right. And that's happening as a result of like skepticism has never been more rampant in the marketplace. And so before people make decisions about whatever it is that you've got, they're like sniffing you out. They're listening to podcasts. They're looking around on Google and doing the Google sniff test and seeing what is out there about you. And a lot of the time, like, you know, if it's a B2B environment, 70% of the decision is made before the prospect reaches out to the company's sales team.
Crazy.
And how do you think that they're making those decisions? They're doing that by attending webinars, reading free reports, reading long form copy, watching podcasts, interviews, doing all of these things. So like the other alternatives that exist in that in that place is obviously Facebook ads and all these other mediums that exist, and the CPMs are going to keep rising on those things. Competition is really, really high. It's going to continue to increase, and so you've got like traffic and you've got conversion and you've got all the different parts that play into that, actually them getting the customer. So the thing that we know that they want is customers. right? And if you ask any company's sales team, why aren't you guys closing more deals? They're going to tell you that the leads aren't good quality enough. And so how do you make leads more good quality? Well, you put out content and a lot of things before that conversation even takes place. So the way that if you understand all those different mechanics, the way that you present your offer becomes very, very different. Because then they're like, let's just say that you charge $5,000 a month, right? You'll edit 2 podcasts, chop up 30 pieces of short form or whatever it is, whatever you charge, right? Let's just say that it's $10,000 a month. And they're like, wow, like that's a lot of money. Like it's just a podcast that we're trying to do. And then you're starting to get into the position of where it's like, well, how much do you spend on ads? Right?
Interesting.
Where do you think those people end up? Like, do you think that someone will expose to you on a Facebook ad, maybe enter in your funnel? If they are interested, Google your name and then start listening to podcasts? Yeah, I do. Well, yeah, the stats show that 70% of people do. So if you don't have a podcast, what do you think they're going to be doing? Oh, they'll probably be looking at someone else's stuff. Yeah, because like if you don't have it, like people like podcasts is like, one of the most successful mediums in the world right now. So if you don't have it, they're just going to be like, one of your competitors are going to be in their ears. And you just basically like, there's a lot of different ways to then present that where it's like in the beginning, they just thought it was a vitamin. Like they just thought it would be cool to have a podcast. But then you're actually showing it's like, no, this is like what a traditional funnel looks like. Like awareness, consideration, right? Now this is what a modern day funnel looks like. It's hyper fragmented. People are jumping around from all different mediums. They're seeing a Facebook ad, listening to a 3-hour podcast and doing all of these things. Unless you have this system in place, your ads are just going to get less and less and less effective, and your customer acquisition cost is going to keep rising. So we basically use podcasts as a parallel funnel to all the other marketing initiatives that people do that basically scoops up all of that demand and it nurtures them until when they're ready to reach out to you. And that's why podcasting has the highest return on investment.
Man, that's so intelligent because it's just going beneath what everyone else is doing, which is we do X, right? It's not even about focusing on output. Yeah, what's interesting is like that's not even focused on. It's obviously not focused on output, but it's not even focused on outcome. It's focused on the broader ecosystem, which is like you really fucking understanding like what's happening here, right? Like what's happening within the business, what's happening with your current business. I don't know if you're familiar with gap selling from Keenan. I met him recently, and his biggest thing on this is like, it's not about implementing the CRM. It's about every single thing that it implements, and also Karen in fucking operations has a headache because of the fact that the CRM isn't implemented properly, which leads to biggest churn in the company. And now people are leaving and now your reputation is getting worse. So it's like understanding that broader ecosystem so you can bring it together and then focus on, let's say, components of revenue, time, so on and so forth.
Yeah, most people are still operating like in the dark ages. Like they're throwing out their carpet and laying out all their wares, and they're just being like, "This is the price, and this is what I've got." Right? It's like, yeah, you want like a podcast. These are the 3 packages, right? You've got like the A, B, and C. We'll do 1 pod a month. This is 2 pods, 3 pods. This is how much short form that you get, and it's just like it's a completely different way to sell. Like it's like. That is like, it doesn't take really, you're not really serving your customers when you serve like that because you're just like a waitress. Like you're just like bringing out the items, right? You're not actually being like a strategist and understanding the problems that they're trying to solve. So that's like to give you an example of how I look at it and how to take like something that like, a podcast, is like would be considered in most people to be a vitamin. Like it'd be good. Like I'm sure there's some benefit long term, but like I don't wake up in a vicious sweat at 3 a.m. in the morning thinking, "Oh my lord, I need to start a podcast." You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%, man. The way I look at it is like execution only, like at the best, like a 6-figure business. The coaching component, which is what we've kind of been using to like help people like basically get better at what they're doing and connect with other people, 7-figure. And then the revenue side, being able to pull a revenue figure, being able to bring leads in, sell shit in the back end, info, whatnot. That's like an 8-figure play because it's like you're moving up in the value chain. You're not just doing, again, the basic shit, right? Because you need to have that kind of broader understanding. I want to ask you about like unique mechanisms and unique angles. So I watch your videos and I literally like I'm like laughing out loud when I watch them because they're like so fucking engaging. Can you walk me through the philosophy behind the Tinder video? I actually showed that to my girlfriend yesterday and she was like literally laughing out loud in a restaurant.
What do you want to specifically know about it?
Like what was the idea between like so your whole approach was like copy, sales copy, psychology of the user. But how can we focus on Tinder? Like, let's go. What's the relationship there between like how brains actually work, no matter what you're doing, whether it's an offer on Tinder or whether it's an offer in a
Yeah.
business.
Like everybody thinks that their business is unique and that their market is unique and that like marketing won't work on their market. And it's just like, you don't know. Like you don't know. So we like, I guess the thing that we're trying to do with our content and our content team is like, how do we take like everyday like business things that like people that are at hardcore into business know and make them like generally applicable to the broader audience so that you get the crossover of like people understanding like how these things apply. And I think that like a lot of people are on dating apps and are on Tinder. And it's one of those things where it's like, you can just like it's directly transferable to that. And it's like I've had friends that have followed that videos that have gone through breakups and then used those tactics and just send me random texts like, how did you know? Like, how did you know that this was going to work? Like my Raya account is blowing up with inbound leads, right? And it's just like, because it's no different. Like it's the same stuff.
That's hilarious, man. But again, if we go back to it, right, it goes back to what I love about your framework. It's like intrigue, right? We're trying to pique curiosity, have a pattern disrupt. And for anyone like that, you have to check out the video, but it's like do something that's unique, right? And when I looked at that, I looked at other areas of your content and it goes to everything, right? Your headshots that you use to copy on your website, like even stuff on LinkedIn. It's just a consistent pattern disrupt. And actually, you'll find this quite interesting. I interviewed Rory Sutherland from Ogilvy Media, whatever it's called, on Tuesday. And we were talking about like, the dichotomy between creative work, so doing stuff that's like in your ads that's super creative, or things that are very logical. And like the business world wants things that are metric driven, logical, which kind of bores the fuck out of you basically when you see it. So when there's a decision, and if he says this from Ogilvy, between A, which is fun and exciting, or B, which produced leads 4 years ago, let's go with B. And it's just more like that safety net. How do you think about that? Because like obviously yours is super fucking creative and it's also working, right? And he's saying this is a problem with the industry and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the way that I look at it is in order to even create the conversation that could be logical, you have to first grab somebody's attention, right? And the marketplace for attention is like more and more chaotic than ever before. And whether or not you're like a boring, manila folder that is like a B2B business and you're selling to Bob, who is 52-year-old and he lives in Wisconsin and like he has a button-up t-shirt and khakis and tucks his pants into his socks. It's like he is still on the news feed, that dude, right? Like, so it's like he's got all of these other things that are infinitely more entertaining than your like boring, dull thing. And it's like the way that the brain is programmed is to hunt for dopamine. So like in order to even get in the room and have that conversation, you first need to grab somebody's attention. When it comes time to making a decision, yeah, like, people are going to justify that decision using logic, but it's like also they do like it's an emotional situation as well. So I just look at it through the lens of like, what am I competing with for attention to even get it in the first place? Because the thing that precedes conversion is consumption. So I'm really concerned about how do I get people to consume the message, right? If you can increase the consumption, you increase the conversion. So if you can get someone to watch, more of your VSL, you're going to get more leads. If you can get people to click on more of your ads, you're going to get more leads. And albeit that it's still defined, it's not blind, like you're still being strategic with who you're trying to get, right? That's where the game is that I try and play.
Are you an entrepreneur who wants to build your influence and authority online? You may have tried some of the hacks and tricks, but none of it has worked. And it makes sense. 90% of podcasts don't make it to episode 3. Of the 10% that are left, 90% of them don't make it to episode 20. That's where Voix comes in. Voix creates, manages, and grows your podcast for you on your behalf. If you've not been getting leads, not been growing consistently, you haven't found your tribe, and you don't know what to do, Voix is the answer. Don't just take our word for it. In the past couple of years, we've managed over 35 podcasts. We've also been able to generate over 55 million views with 500 episodes produced. And not only that, generating over $1 million for our clients in products, services, and sponsorships. So if you want to learn more about how you can build a great podcast and have it fully managed for you, schedule a call with me at Voix and we will help you achieve your podcast goals.
That's super interesting, man. If you think about like how that gets stripped out from B2B, even consumer stuff, why do you think that is? Do you think people are looking at other people, like maybe not even looking at yours, because your stuff sometimes can be even difficult to recreate, but looking at some basic versions and thinking, what is this, right? It's like social proof. Like, this is how it was done. Let's just copy this approach because I don't have the skills myself. Like, why do you think people are less inclined to push the envelope?
I think that like people are like risk adverse, right? And like if you look at most people that like run these things, it's like typically a lot of the time it's not going to be founder led, and it's going to be some marketing manager that's assigned to do something. And most people don't want to do risky, exciting work.
Yeah.
They want to do safe work, and most people want a disproportionate result or a disproportionate output, but then they just put the same inputs in. And they think that some magical thing is going to get them some wildly different response. Where it's like, by definition, if you want to get results that other people don't get, then you just have to do things that other people aren't willing to do, because that's the only way that you're going to stand out. But like, I think that like being normal and being boring is like the quickest way to like kill a business, and it's going to continue to be that way as things get more and more competitive. The barriers to entry get lower and lower, and as more and more people flood online, and as we start spending even more time than what we currently are online, and the avenues and the options that exist to spend that time on just infinitely grow, then it's just going to become harder and harder to get people's attention, because you are in the attention Hunger Games. You are not competing with Bob, your competitor from down the street. You're competing with the new Tom Brady roast and this stand-up and this half-naked supermodel and all of these other different things that are popping in and constantly happening. And as more influencers come online, as more podcasters come online, as Netflix launches more shows, as more YouTube channels come up, that like attention remains the same. You only have so much time that you can spend on things per day, but then the options that exist for that attention is just increasing exponentially. So the people that are the best at like grabbing it and holding it, they're the ones in all the different avenues that are going to be doing the best.
And expectations are increasing, right? I don't know, are you familiar with Category of One by Scott Calloway? He talks about like how the baseline standard is just getting higher and higher for what users expect. So it's like if you go into a hotel and if you don't see the towel on the bed, you're like, where the fuck is the towel? Because you're so used to like 2 towels being on the bed when you walk into the room. And that standard is going up. So they could have all the bells and whistles, the dancing songs, the trending sounds, but if the towel isn't on the bed, you're like, what the fuck is going on, right? It's like this standard continuously going up. This is actually subconscious though. It's not like focal in your brain, right? You just expect it. So if you were to compare 2 creatives against each other, it's basically going to be creative. It's going to be interesting, right? You're not competing against Bob down the street. It's like the Mr. Beast equivalent of someone who's like 16-year-old who's grown up in that economy, right? They're understanding that value. Now, I want to ask you about influencer brands. This is interesting, right? You do a lot of kind of like breakdowns and stuff, which are really cool. What has, some of those businesses taught you about building distribution? Because some of those businesses, like some of them are kind of like fucking basic as fuck, right? But they sell a lot. What has that taught you about how to build distribution organically and then being able to monetize it downstream?
Yeah, I think that like the first thing that comes up is like, obviously we're living in an attention economy, and that is the first transaction, right? And it's like you need to be able to, like, the reason that a lot of these businesses are blowing up is because they have the audience, right? And they've delayed the ask on that audience. They've built it up, built it up, built it up. And I think that like a lot of like what we're seeing right now is like the first wave of like influencer brands. And like, you know, the very first step before even the first wave was like obviously influencers promoting other people's products. And it got to a point where like they were like, hey, how come I'm promoting this? If this person's paying me $100,000 for this, then obviously they're making more money than this. And then you've got all of these people that are coming in off the back of it that are like business houses that are then partner with influencers, and then these influencers are launching their own brands. And there's like it's like 50-50 split. Like a 50% of the time it's like that person's got like a back office where it's like a situation with like Prime where it's like there's another person that actually runs that business, and then you've got like the puppet heads that are the talking people for that business. And I think that what we're going to see is that there's going to be a lot of influencers that are like they're doing like the cash grab, and they're basically starting businesses that have the largest TAM, the large total addressable market, and things that aren't necessarily congruent with their brand or their audience. And there's people that see success, and then there's people that don't see success. Like there's someone that like might launch a business purely based on cash, and they will see like that they will get a spike in sales, and they will have like a year or two of really good operating, and then it will start to unwind, which we're starting to see now. And then there's another lens of it, which is like influencers starting businesses that they're just really passionate about, that have like a very logical, congruent path to their audience and what their audience is potentially interested in, or what they're interested in, so they want to try to sell it to their audience, and it's not necessarily what everybody wants. So I think it's like that whole ikigai Japanese model of like picking something that like your market wants, that you're also passionate about, and that like people are willing to pay for, and having the mixture of those. I don't think it just having the attention is enough. I think it's enough for like a short-term spike. I don't think like that's what we call building an offer, not building a business, right? So it's like they'll have like a promo, things will be good, then they'll stop innovating on the product because they're not really passionate about it, or it's just they can't operate the business because it's not something they're passionate about and there's no congruence with it. So it's interesting. I think that the thing that it has taught me the most is about like, as customer acquisition costs keep rising and the cost of traffic keeps going up, if you can have a CAC advantage, which is what all these businesses have, they don't need to spend money on advertising, right? Because they've built the audience. So they've paid with time instead of money, right? With money, you run ads. With time, you build an audience. And that can give you a big terminal monopoly if you get all of the things right. If it's a product that you can make, it's got a good TAM that you're passionate about, that's congruent with your audience, and you can use that as an advantage. I think that it's definitely legitimate, and it's something that's very, very powerful because people spend so much time with those audiences. And we all know the old adage of like, you do business with people that you know, like, and trust. And in order to get people to know, like, and trust you, you have to let people know, like, and trust you. And so the way that you do that is like by building an audience and doing all of those things. And I think that in every single category that you look at, people are getting more cluey, they're doing more research, and they're spending more time with people. And it comes up to the whole podcast thing that we spoke about, right? Like, I think that, 5 years ago, not many people were running like funnels. They weren't running like with VSLs and booker calls and selling high ticket. Now everybody's doing it, right? And everybody out in Canggu's high ticket closes, and everyone's doing this stuff. And so it's like the market goes full circle, and it's like you go through that whole thing, and people have been burnt from that experience, and then they're like, well, that wasn't a pleasurable experience. So then what do? Well, they get really skeptical, and they're still listening to podcasts. People listen to podcasts more than ever. They're watching YouTube videos more than ever. They're following people on all these platforms. And then that just removes a huge part of that question of, is this person legit? Because they've already been exposed to their content so much.
And you're getting in that 7 hours, right? That's 7 hours of consumption, so that you're able to make the next step. You mentioned something really interesting as well about the quality of the products, right? And I think this is what's funny. I think people talk about 0 to 1 being so difficult. I think like 1 to 10 or 10 to like 100 is the challenge, right? Because it's consistently keeping it up, either innovating or just doing the day to day to get it done, right? Do you think like a lot of these businesses are like well sounded, like they're well, like the prime example, right? Like of the drink and shit. Like, are they quality products, or is it more just we're just getting any sort of like fucking consumer good out so that we can monetize it? And I know that's a big question, it's a broad question, but it sounds like a lot of stuff can be kind of quite like white label, especially in like the supplement space, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that like that's where like the tide will go out and everyone will be exposed, right?
Yeah.
Like there's already stuff happening with Prime and the caffeine and how they're labeling it and that it's marketed towards children and that it's really bad for you and all of those other things that are kind of coming into it. And I think that like on the one end, it's like if you're like someone like Huberman, right? And like you've got like such a diehard group of people that follow you and it like he tells you to go outside barefoot and sun your forehead and all like everyone will be doing that. And it's like when you've got someone that's building like such a deep connection with their audience and then if they launch their own supplement line and that they have a level of standards, like they're not going to put out something that they're not proud of. And that it's going to be the best ingredients. Like then you just become the category killer, right? Because you're the person that is influencing the most amount of people. And because you have the CAC advantage or any of those things, you can invest that into the product and you can just literally make the best product that exists. And that's where you can use those things to an advantage. But I think the biggest thing is when people go, oh, we've got such an advantage on the CAC that we will just make that up as extra profit. Like we'll just make like a product that isn't so great. Like you see all these YouTubers launching lollies and like chocolate and shit. Like that's like, do you know what I mean? It's like, that's where there's not a huge amount of congruence.
And it's also like what are we fucking doing here, right? We're like adults making like lollipops. Like there has to be like some sort of logic behind like how do we do this, right? Before we finish up, I have one last question for you on the T-shaped approach. You're one of the few people I see mention T-shaped, and I've only heard this concept about a year ago as well. How do you think about that in the concept of like what you've been building over the years in terms of skills, and like how can people make this actionable for them?
Yeah, I think that like if we look at it through the lens of like marketing, it's a simple analogy to use. It's like if you want to be a good digital marketer, right? You want to have like a skill set that's like wide, like i.e. you want to know about email marketing, you want to know a little bit about SEO, you want to know about Facebook ads, you want to know about webinars, for instance, and you want to know enough to be a little bit dangerous in all of those things. So how you can understand the overall picture and the overall landscape. But then you want to pick one specialty that you go very, very deep in. And I like to go very, very deep on the skill set that I get the most compound interest for and has the longest half-life. Like if you were to like, I'm going to go very deep on Facebook ads. Well, what we know about Facebook ads now is going to be entirely different to what we know about it in 4 years' time. So all of the skills that you invest right now, the half-life on them is probably 24 months. And then pretty much all the skills that you've acquired from running Facebook ads, you're going to be relearning new skills, right? It's going to be different campaign structures. It's going to be much more leveraged off AI. These platforms are going to remove more and more abilities for us to be able to use those skills on their platform, and they're going to be taking back control, and then they're going to be relying more on their algorithm to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and we're already seeing that. So I like to think of like, what are those skill sets that are going to continue to provide dividends forever, right? Storytelling, communication, showmanship, leadership, like all of those things. It's like they're going to be present in a year's time, in 10 years' time. So it's the whole Jeff Bezos. I try to focus on the things that aren't going to change, not the ones that are going to change, because everything's changing so quickly, right? And all of those things are changing. So I try to, for myself, look at things that are going to provide the most leverage. And obviously, one part of that is like being a better leader and, leading, a team of 100 people and being able to attract those people and then bring them in and then lead them in the best way that I possibly can. It all comes down to your ability to communicate. And so the better that you can get at that, the more clear and concise that you are with your ability to do that. It's like it compounds across everything, compounds across the way that your employer brand is out there in the marketplace and how you hire people and how you attract them, how you lead those people. It comes down to how you attract customers, how you get them. Because if you're better at communicating, then your message is a lot sharper and it cuts through all the noise in the marketplace. And look at what is not a shiny object, like what is going to be apparent moving forward, and then understanding that I still need to know enough to be dangerous in those other things to run a business, but also knowing that like, okay, like creating like macros and spreadsheets and running crazy like cash flow analysis and forecasts isn't something that like I'm going to be doing in 5 years from now. I'm going to be plugging in my business software into AI and it's going to literally be forecasting everything out for me. Right. So what is it that I think I will be doing? Will I still be hiring people? Will I still be having a team? Will I still be creating a company and a culture? Yes. Okay. What are the skills that I need to work on today that is going to better serve me in 10 years to do those things?
Man, it's so funny to look at that in the context of when people stop their business and then start selling info around it, right? Because you're talking about how things are changing so quickly. So how the fuck could you be teaching people courses, right, on like how to build an agency when, as you mentioned, ads change every 20 minutes. Things are constantly evolving. It's just an interesting observation, right? Because you are so close to the detail, obviously doing other things too, that you're able to see this and kind of give a bird's eye view, which is pretty unique, right? Because a lot of people are in the selling courses business versus the building businesses business. I want to say a big thank you, man.
And a lot of the people that are selling the courses on that topic, it's like, they're not even like qualified to be selling a course on that. Like they'll get a business up to 1 million or 2 million, which is like a nightmare to run. Like that's like the worst place to operate an agency at, because you haven't created a business for yourself. You just created like a much more demanding job. And instead of having one boss, you've got 10 or 30 of them, they're clients, and you know what I mean? Like it becomes a big problem, where it's like, again, it's about looking at those fundamental through lines that aren't going to change. And all the stuff is noise, because it all comes down to like, what is it that you want in the first place? What do you want to be doing? Where do you derive fun for? Because if you're just changing like digits in the bank account, like that stuff will come and go. But like, what is it that you want to be doing? What lights you up? What do you have fun? What makes you laugh your ass off? And that you get a lot of enjoyment around, and then how can you build a business around doing those things?
Yeah, man, there's lots of food for thought here. This is such a good podcast. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're a super busy guy, but I want to say a big thank you. This was great. Would love to do the next one in Canggu with all the high ticket closers when you're coming in for a vacation.